video, as you can see, I'm in the car. We have just arrived home, and I just wanted to get today's video up. So the last video got cut off, so apologies for that. We didn't have enough space on John's phone. So it ended quite abruptly. We had talked about Wicca, where Wicca began, and having Gerald Gardner in the 1950s, the start of Gardnerian Wicca, and Alex Sanders in the 1970s with the start of Alexandrian Wicca, which would be the two main Wiccan traditions, if you like. So we talked about what paganism is in that first video. So if you haven't seen that, go back and see part one, which is dated the day before this live video. So if you've already watched that, we can dive into what Wiccans believe. And the basic tenets of Wicca are the same now as they were in the 50s or the 70s to a certain extent. So the main parts of Wicca are that it's dual theistic generally, that there is a god and a goddess. And back in the day, gender balance was a very, very important part of Wicca as it formed originally. So the idea of a pairing between a god and a goddess was very much an integral part of what people were doing, and it's very much a product of its time as well, because you're coming from a very patriarchal, masculine-based deity mentality within the society in the 1950s, 1960s, 1970s, and before, obviously. And you're opening that up with the idea of a goddess, and that it's balanced with a god. So that's a very, very important part, and you see that reflected then in the structure of the priesthood for Wicca as well. So there is a high priestess and a high priest who would be the organizers and the founders usually of a coven. So Wiccans would work in a coven, which could be anything more than 2 and less than 13 traditionally. Now I'm going to talk about traditional Wicca because A, that's my background, and B, there are a lot of changes and differences within specific Wiccan traditions within the neo-pagan movement, and honestly I can't keep up and I can't account for them all. So I'm going to talk about traditional Wicca and the basics of that. And you will see different groups, different traditions doing things differently, but those are other videos. Okay, so this is where we're at right now with this one. So, and I just got a comment there thanking me for sharing such interesting information, and you're very welcome. I'm absolutely delighted. I'm sorry about the poor quality of these vlogs. Like I said, I have been away. We were traveling in England, so I'm just arriving back. I just arrived back in Ireland, and I wanted to do my daily content, so here we are. So if you are interested in seeing more live videos and getting the daily content, please do subscribe to the YouTube channel down below and hit the bell so you get notifications when videos are going live or your videos go up. So like I said, you see that reflected, you see that gender kind of balance, that traditional gender balance between like male and female polarity. The binary was very much a part of traditional Wicca, and to a degree really, that in some of the early covens gay people weren't welcome, and certainly not trans people, and there were a lot of issues. Now thankfully that has changed, and I really can't, well, I'm not going to say there aren't, but there really shouldn't be. There's no fucking excuse for it, for having a situation where, see my dog in the background there, we collected him from his grandparents' house, so say hi to Russ. And we have yeah, like I said, there's no excuse for that now. Those kind of attitudes were very much a product of their time, and they were wrong then, and they're wrong now. So gender as an expression is not, and you know, even if you're working with a gendered, a male-female binary in a magical or religious context, it is not dependent on A, your sexuality, or it's not dependent on B, you know, what you happen to have been born with between your legs. Because personally I can work with God or goddess energy, and anybody worth their fucking salt can. So don't let anybody tell you that, you know, what's between your legs is any kind of a factor in what kind of magic or religious practice you should be doing, because there is no place for that in our modern communities. So the coven structure, which we were just talking about there, you will see that ultimately, even though there is that kind of balanced partnership between a high priest and a high priestess, the book stopped with the high priestess. There was definitely like an equality and a polarity going on, but within the traditional Wiccan structure, theoretically or ideally even at least, it was the high priestess who was channeling the goddess, who was speaking for the goddess. And while the god had a place in that, the rituals are very much focused on the goddess. So you will see a very central premise of, or very central ritual of Wicca has always been what we would call drawing down the moon, which is literally the channeling of the goddess into a priestess by a priest. And initiations as well were done or are done male to female. Again, not reliant on what's between your legs, but that is how the tradition is structured. So it's passed from male to female. So the drawing down the moon, which is the channeling of the goddess into the priestess, resulted in, or results, I mean, I'm using past tense just to explain that. I'm using past tense. Oh, we're in the dark now. Okay. Can I turn this light? Or can I use your phone? Sure. Sorry, excuse me. I'm going to get back now to lighted situation any minute. Okay, perfect. Kind of. Yeah, that's grand. That's fine, thank you. Say hi to John. He's our chauffeur or driver for the evening. So, oh, that's a very harsh light. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. It's fine. Good. Okay. So, drawing down the moon, and it resulted in, sorry, the reason that I'm using past tense is because I was 18 when I began in traditional Wicca, and I was moving from a situation of being very nature orientated myself as a child, and growing up in my family, and very into Irish heritage, mythology, stories, otherworldly experiences, the fairies, all the other stuff that are part of my native practice now. You know, were very much part then. But I met a group who I met a high priestess actually, Barbara Lee, who was from the Alexandrian tradition. So her initiator would have been Stuart Farrar, and she would have been in the coven with Janet and Stuart Farrar, who are very well known Wiccan authors from back in the day. And obviously Janet still is teaching and writing books with her partner Gavin Bowe. So maybe not obviously, you may not know that, but I do, and they are they're still friends of mine, and Barbara Lee is still a friend of mine. So that would be where my lineage is coming from. Janet and Stuart would have been initiated by Alexander's directly, who I mentioned earlier as the originator of the Alexandrian tradition. Alex and Maxine Sanders were the high priest and high priestess within that tradition. So that's my background, and that's where I was kind of coming from. And as you can see by that brief kind of synopsis and timeline, Wicca is also an initiatory tradition. So you have what we call lineage, descending from person to person, and we trace our heritage, our Wiccan heritage, back in that way. And that's not an elitist thing. That is something that is important because it's a fraternal and fraternity and a sorority initiatory tradition. I'm getting those words wrong, but you know what I mean. Brotherhood and sisterhood are very important. So that's where kind of lineage comes in, because it's more like a clan, a family, like a tribe of Wiccans who are all kind of connected to each other through a network. So that's what the lineage has always meant to me. I know other people use it as some kind of fucking pedigree puppy papers, but for me it's about connection and community, and that's the importance of it for me and for a lot of other Wiccans I know. So when the drawing down the moon happens and the goddess is channeled into sometimes the deities, and there is a drawing down of the sun as well that happens, but it usually only happens on feast days, on the Sabbaths, and there are 8 through the year within the Wiccan calendar, the 8 Sabbaths. I do have other videos on the channel which look at the Irish versions of those festivals, so you might want to pick up those if you like. But there will be different rituals that happen at Sabbats and at Esbats. So Sabbats are the 8 festivals through the year, and Esbats are the full moon festivals. So Wiccans traditionally would meet once in the month, and better would be when the moon is full, which is a line from, I'll get there eventually, from what happens when the goddess is invited into the circle to speak through the priestess. And there are a couple of different ways that happens depending on the priestess's relationship with the goddess. The usual deities that are associated with Wicca are Cernunnos and Aradia through the traditional lines. But any goddess can really be evoked or invoked into the circle or into the high priestess directly. And when that happens, the priestess is channeling the deity and speaks for the deity or as the deity. And sometimes that happens in the form of what's called the charge of the goddess. So the charge of the goddess, you may be familiar with. There are many different versions of it. Each high priestess, as part of our 2nd degree initiation, there are 3 degrees within that initiatory system. As part of the 2nd degree initiation, when you are kind of ready to take a circle, ready to lead a circle as a high priest or a high priestess, for a high priestess, you are expected to learn the charge of the goddess, which is this big, long kind of prose piece, which I'm not going to recite now. Maybe I'll do another video on that. But we learn it by heart, and it was written by a woman called Dorian Valiente, and it is a very, very beautiful and evocative piece of prose/poetry. It's quite poetic, but it is actually prose, and it's the goddess speaking to her people, to her tribe, and to her community, rather, sorry. And sometimes that happens, and when that happens within a group, it's interesting because, you know, even you know, you're doing this month on month and you're hearing the same words month on month, but you always hear, each person within the circle will hear different parts of that. And that's maybe, I'll do another video on channeling. So if you want to hear that, if you want to hear about that, comment below, because I'm not sure if people are interested in that, so I kind of stopped there. But that is a central and integral part of kind of what happens within those full moon rituals, those monthly rituals. And you know, you would also learn, there's teaching time within the circles. There's you would be learning the ritual. There is a set Wiccan ritual that happens, that you know, there's a blessing of salt and water, a calling of the quarters, a casting of the circle, and there are various elements within that ritual that would be the same all the time, and that's a really important part. And again, why we do ritual, whether it's Wiccan or any type of ritual, is another whole other video as well. This one's already getting quite long, so if you want to hear about that, comment below and I can do another video on that. So we have, I think I've kind of touched on most things in a bit of a rambly way, but it is a vlog, so you know what to expect. I might do a blog post on this as well. Although there's lots on Wicca. If you want to go and Google traditional Wicca, you'll get the basic tenets of Wicca are pretty similar. The only thing I haven't really covered is a thing called the Wiccan Rede, which is 8 words the Wiccan Rede fulfill, and it harm none, do what you will. And it actually is based on different. That's the most often quoted. Oh, there's a Book of Shadows as well. So within the Book of Shadows, you know, you'll get that as one of the opening lines. And the Book of Shadows is kind of like a book of rituals and spells, and you know, a collection of wisdom, which is another thing that's passed through lineages. So when you get initiated into a coven, you take the high priestesses usually, or sometimes the high priest's Book of Shadows, and you will hand copy it out, and then add to it then as you go. So it becomes a Book of Shadows now within Paganism is you know, your handwritten notebook or spell book or prayer book or whatever it is. But the original Book of Shadows, that's what it was this book of rituals that is passed, you know, in secret through covens. They've all been published now at this point, so you can look those up if you want. The Wiccan Rede is kind of it's a funny one, because you know, different people interpret it in different ways, but generally it's taken that Wicca is a religion, a religious belief or a spiritual belief that is not going to harm anyone or anything. And you know that there's the law of threefold return, that anything that you do will come back to you 3 times, you know, whether that's good or ill. And those are very basic kind of ethical concepts. They get very complicated when you actually put them into practice, but you know, within different circumstances and situations and everything. But generally Wicca would very much be along the lines of, you know, don't be a dick and try and kind of sort out your shit and make sure that you're treading lightly in this world. Because essentially, you know, to go back to the first video, to go back to Wicca and paganism is this umbrella term, and Wicca, you know, Wicca is one factor or one element of that. So you have the general kind of beliefs of paganism, which would be very respectful, ethical, you know, walking lightly in the world, not harming, and working in connection, being in right relationship. My own personal Irish paganism is very much about being in right relationship with everything around me, from the world to the communities to the people to the animals to, you know, everything, the gods, the she, the elements, the nature spirits, all of that. So I think I probably covered everything there. As I said, a little bit of a rambly vloggy style, so hopefully you've enjoyed listening to that. If you do want more daily content through November, and obviously then, you know, continuing on, please do hit subscribe down below, and I will see you in the next video. It's long before.